Okay, let's simplify this trigonometric expression into a single trig function with no fractions. So looking at this, we have sine and cosine, but we also have a secant hanging out here. What I always like to do is first start by replacing anything that isn't a sine or cosine with an expression that means the same thing but does involve sines or cosines. So we can replace secant with 1 over cosine. So let's begin there. So we have sine of x divided by 1 over cosine of x minus cosine of x. From here, we have a fraction inside of a bigger fraction. So let's eliminate this. The easiest way to do this is by multiplying both numerator and denominator by cosine of x, in this case, over cosine of x. By multiplying by the same thing, numerator and denominator, this is like multiplying by 1. From here, we're going to have to do a little bit of distributing with this denominator. So that's going to be multiplied by each of those. So our numerator is just going to be sine of x times cosine of x. But our denominator now is going to be the whole goal of multiplying by cosine over cosine was to eliminate that fraction. So it'll cancel out with the denominator. So we have 1 minus cosine squared of x. The next thing I notice is we have a square in our denominator. This is pointing us towards the Pythagorean identities. So we have sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. We can do a little bit of rearranging here and get sine squared equals 1 minus cosine squared. And I'm using x's here because x's are in our formula over here as we're trying to simplify down. So what that tells us is we can replace 1 minus cosine squared in our denominator. We can put a sine squared in that place. Sorry, this is not subtracted in our numerator. This is multiplied in our numerator, divided by, we replace that with sine squared of x. From here, it's a little bit of algebra that we have a sine being multiplied in the numerator and a sine squared, meaning 2 copies of sine multiplied in the denominator. We're going to be able to cancel out this copy with one of these copies in our denominator. What that tells us is we now have cosine divided by 1 copy of sine. When you have cosine over sine, this is pointing us towards a quotient identity. Cosine divided by sine is equivalent to cotangent. So we can finish this up and say that's equivalent to cotangent of x. All right, so as you get going on these, remember always replace anything that isn't a sine or cosine with something equivalent that involves sines or cosines. Get rid of fractions within fractions. And then whenever you have a square, that's pointing you towards a Pythagorean identity. From there, it's a bunch of algebra, just to simplify down, and using a quotient identity to replace this into a single function, trig function, without any fractions. All right, I hope this helps. Good luck to you on these.